Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Amen.
You run 7 days a week.
The sound of the shofar calls us together at this moment of solemnity. They went to the synagogue, put on their yarmulkes, wrapped themselves in their talisim, prayed, and never came out. Perhaps they were reciting the Shehechianu. Perhaps on their lips was the Shema. On our lips is now the Kaddish. November 1938, Germany? No. Pittsburgh, USA, 2018. How does one explain that which cannot be explained? How does one understand that which cannot be understood? The answer must lie in memory, forever ingrained. For it is the scar of memory that gives mankind another chance. So we remember today as we must, Kristallnacht, and yes, Pittsburgh, as we pray to a merciful God. We remember for all time. We remember. We remember. To conduct today's special commemoration of Kristallnacht, I call upon the indefatigable Alex Keish.
Thank you, Tommy. I don't think I can even spell that. Ladies and gentlemen, those who are able to, please stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We want to thank the Jewish Community Federation of Richmond for their ongoing team and financial support to help make this annual program possible. Representative-elect Abigail Spanberger, Delegates Deborah Rodman and Donovan, Daniel Staffenberg, CEO of the Federation, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alex Keish. I am the groundskeeper and vice president of this sacred place, and also the chairman of this year's Kristallnacht Committee. EmekSholom in Hebrew means Valley of Peace, and I walk these peaceful grounds sometimes as groundskeeper, sometimes as a private citizen. Silently and in reflection mostly. On one of these walks last spring, I noticed a small snowy white flower. It was growing in scattered clusters everywhere. I had never seen this before. Curiosity led me to call our gardeners up, and I asked them, and they informed me it was called Star of David. They were spread like spiritual manna on this, our sacred side. Look at your programs, and you'll see what the Star of David flower looks like. So when you walk these hallowed grounds on a beautiful spring day in any of the years to come, look for these sweet little flowers, and they will hark you back to this day of memories that we call Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, the 80th anniversary. Alexandra Zapruder, who is with us today. Thank you, Alexandra. She had a marvelous book that she had done, her first book that she had done, called Salvaged Pages. There was a Romanian high school student, Miriam Korber, who wrote in her diary and strung a hidden note in my heart. If the cries of the women could only reach the heavens, and their tears gather in the sea, perhaps then heavenly compassion will pour out to those wretched souls. She said, I am happy when evening comes and I can go to bed. At least I sleep, and for a few hours I can forget. So what does she want to forget? The numbing cold, the numbing brutality, the numbing hunger, the numbing fear, the rivulets of tears that flow into the streams that run to the seas? I say to you, my dear Miriam Korber, for as long as we meet here each anniversary of Kristallnacht, we will never forget. Not your numbing cold, not your numbing hunger, not your numbing fear, not the numbing brutality that you lived with daily. And we remember you and those women who helped to fill the seas with their tears. We will remember always, Zakor, Zakor, remember, remember. Because we make time stand still for the few moments of our gathering here. Remembering is why we're here today. Thank you all for remembering. And please also remember this, an important message and lesson for today and all days. Love for all and hatred for none. Dr. Deborah Rodman, the Honorable Representative of our 73rd District in Virginia, holds several full-time jobs. One is a mother, one is a wife, one is an associate professor at Randolph-Macon College, where she teaches anthropology and women's studies, having earned several undergraduate and graduate degrees in anthropology, women's studies, marine affairs, and policy. I'll have to talk with her some more about that, being an ancient mariner, as well as her PhD in anthropology. Since the aforementioned vocations don't sufficiently challenge her, she has also a couple of part-time jobs, such as appearing as an expert witness for asylum seekers and representing her constituents in the 73rd Virginia District. She captains the 73 District, a district with 80,010 civilians on board that she has to answer to and be responsible for. I know from personal experience that when you're a captain of a ship, there is no downtime. You take it to bed and you wake up with it in the morning. It's a job you sleep with and live with 24 hours a day. And though she has a little extra time to spare, she is here today for a very special announcement that she will make along with Representative-elect Abigail Spanberger. Please help me welcome the Honorable Deborah Rodman and the Honorable Representative-elect Abigail Spanberger.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is my honor today, on behalf of the Governor and the Commonwealth of Virginia, to have a commemoration, a certificate of recognition for the 80th anniversary of Kristallnacht. And I'm going to read it to you today. It is so beautifully written, and thank you so very much. I will also have a resolution for the General Assembly that I will be presenting in January. By virtue of the authority vested by the Constitution of Virginia in the Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, there is hereby officially recognized the 80th anniversary of Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass. Whereas the Holocaust was the state-sponsored systematic persecution and annihilation of European Jewry by Nazi Germany and its collaborators between 1933 and 1945, and whereas 6 million Jews, more than 1.5 million of whom were innocent children, were murdered, while millions of other people also suffered grievous oppression and death under the Nazi tyranny. And whereas November 9th, 2018 through November 10th, 2018 marks the 80th anniversary of Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass. And whereas during Kristallnacht, the hundreds of synagogues in Germany and Austria were burned and destroyed, businesses and homes were ransacked, scores of innocent Jews were killed, and thousands of others were arrested and sent to concentration camps. And whereas Kristallnacht serves as a prelude to the Holocaust and the systematic mass murder on a scale never seen before in human history. And whereas the reign of Nazi government marks one of the darkest periods in civilized history, and whereas the commemoration of this unprecedented event reminds us all of our solemn duty to keep alive the memory of the millions who perished during the Holocaust and to ensure through education and mutual respect that acts of genocide shall never, ever again occur. Now, therefore, I, Ralph S. Northam, do hereby recognize November 9th, 2018 as the 80th anniversary of Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, in our Commonwealth of Virginia, and I call this observance to the attention of all citizens. On behalf of our governor, thank you very much.
Ms. Bamberger, do you care to say a word or two, other than you're glad to be alive after that torturous route that you took?
I'm pleased to be here today. Thank you.
We're going to call up our two co-presidents, Cookie Soledar and Ben Kuttner, for the proper presentation. Would you help in the presentation?
Absolutely.
Thank you so very much. And on behalf of the governor.
Thank you. This is for you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're most grateful to our friends in the state capitol and our legislature to honor us in this fashion. I understand there's a resolution pending that will also be forwarded in the January session of our legislature. Dr. Rodman, I most humbly thank you on behalf of all of us gathered here today. It feels good to be recognized, and it feels good to have friends. And here's another take on that subject of friends. We had a different gathering here in March of 2017, a gathering of many faiths organized by Rabbi Michael Knopf of Temple Bethel and Jonathan Zur of the Virginia Center of Inclusive Communities. It was a symbolic response to the unity to the desecration of Jewish graves in several states. In addition, a call went out to the national Muslim community to raise $30 to make these cemeteries whole again. In only 3 weeks, our Muslim brothers and sisters raised over $130,000. In addition, the Ahmadiyas went one step further. They physically offered to protect any synagogues, any temples, and any cemeteries, any place in our country. And that wasn't just empty words, that was meaningful. More recently, the Muslim communities of Pittsburgh helped to raise over $200,000 for the Tree of Life Synagogue. If you want a friend, be a friend. If you want a brother, be a brother or a sister. I present to you, as another special announcement, a brilliant graduate of the University of Richmond Law School, husband, father, author, lecturer, a Truman National Security Fellow, and all-around mensch. A Muslim who embraces religious pluralism, and he's a spokesperson for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. My brother, Bahi Qasim Rashid, come up here, share a few words with us. If you don't know, the Truman National Security Organization Project is a nationwide membership organization of frontline civilians, veterans, political professionals, policy experts who conduct education and advocacy and work on national security and foreign policy issues in the United States of America. If I had just been elected to Congress, I'd seek out really smart people for counsel. He also claims to be a dad joke maven, the only field of expertise that I think I could challenge him in. Qasim.
Thank you. I was trying to think of a better word than indefatigable to describe Alex. I can't do it. I'm beyond privileged and honored to speak before you today, and I wanted to share some meaningful words. And the words that really meant most to me were kind of sharing the journey of how Alex and I first became friends several years ago. And as I thought about this, 3 really important incidences stood out in my life. One from my childhood, one from a lesson I learned about an event that happened about 1,400 years ago, and one from an event that happened last year. This event from my childhood was probably the first incident that I can recall of understanding the reality of anti-Semitism in America today. I was probably 8 or 9 years old. It was late 1980s, early 1990s. We had a new kid in class named Joseph. And we've all been in school when a new kid shows up. Everybody wants to learn about him or her and find out what they're all about. And so at recess, everybody surrounded Joseph, and I kind of quietly observed. I was new to the school just a few months prior myself. And they asked typical questions that you would ask of a kid. Where did you move from? Do you have any brothers or sisters? What cool toys did you get for Christmas? And Joseph had a little furrow in his brow whenever he would have to think about his answer. And he said, well, we don't celebrate Christmas. We're Jewish. And as if somebody turned down the music, suddenly nobody was interested in talking to Joseph anymore. Laughter erupted and the kids dispersed as quickly as they'd come. Now I sat there confused, wondering what in the world just happened, because as the only Muslim in class, I also didn't celebrate Christmas. And I thought to myself, do I need to be more careful? That night, I asked my father an innocent question because he knew something was wrong. And I didn't know how to express myself, so I just bluntly said, Dad, is there something wrong with being friends with a Jewish kid? Now my father, a theologian and a servant of humanity in his own right, I've never seen him so concerned and on the borderline of anger. And he said, who told you that? Who asked you that? Well, I related the whole story to him, after which he said, tomorrow, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go and find Joseph and you're going to ask him if we can play at recess together. Now, at that impressionable age, my life could have taken any number of turns. But my father made sure that his children would not tolerate this anti-Semitism, not just by words, but also by their actions. And for the rest of the year, the one Muslim kid and the one Jewish kid always had a friend to play with at recess. And as I got older and I began to understand my faith, Islam, even more, I began to learn about the incidents that happened 1400 years ago in Arabia when the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, peace be upon him, actively sought out to end anti-Semitism. When he signed the Charter of Medina with the Jewish tribes of Medina, Article 7 explicitly said, no Jew shall be wronged for being a Jew. He had to call this out in writing, that this type of discrimination will not be permitted. And then he backed it up with actions. In one famous example, a cemetery preceded by the Prophet, and he stood up out of respect for the deceased. And the people said to him, but oh Prophet, this was a funeral procession of a Jewish person. And the Prophet angrily responded, was he not a human being? Did he not have a soul? Once again, in word and in deed, exemplifying that we must constantly stand on guard against this discrimination. And the final incident, as we look around and realize that in 2017 alone, we saw a 60% increase in the level of anti-Semitic attacks in the United States, the highest increase in 1 year since 1979 when this data first began to be recorded. When the cemetery in Philadelphia was attacked and vandalized, our local chapter of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community was on site within an hour to offer our prayers, our solidarity, and to offer our protection for synagogues and cemeteries all around the country. And just last month, when the head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad, the Khalifa, inaugurated a new mosque in Philadelphia, he made clear that if you are harmed and you need a shoulder to cry on, we will be there to wipe away your tears. Once again, exemplifying that we will not only stand with you in words, but we will also stand with you in actions. And it is through this experience that I've been fortunate to befriend people like Alex, and I consider myself a friend of every person here today. And just know that no matter where our country goes in the future, you have a friend in the Muslim community, you have a friend in me, and I know that I can count on you as well. Thank you, and God bless you.
I graduated from the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, Kings Point, one of the 5 federal academies, and our motto is acta non verba. And the Ahmadiyya are a good example of that. Ladies and gentlemen, each year we try to share a story from one of the 462 names on the memorial wall behind me. When possible, this is done by a surviving family member to honor the memory of a loved one murdered in Europe. Keep in mind that these revered 462 names are merely placeholders for the 6 million others who have no graves and who died for their faiths as martyrs in Europe, murdered at the behest of a madman. A small group of immigrant refugees and survivors of the Nazi slaughter in Europe arrived in safe haven in America, here in Richmond, and with great pride called themselves the New American Club of Richmond. On November 6, 1955, they pooled their meager resources to build this memorial to remind the world never again, because nothing like this should ever, ever, ever happen again. However, sadly today we must wipe tears away once more because it has happened again in our safe haven in our America. In addition to the 462 named on the memorial behind me who serve as placeholders for the 6 million, we add the names of 11 more martyrs. These two were murdered for their faith in Pittsburgh 2 weeks and 1 day ago. They are Joyce Feinberg, Richard Gottfried, Rose Mallinger, Jerry Rabinowitz, brothers Cecil and David Rosenthal, Bernice and Silva Simon, husband and wife, Daniel Stein, Melvin Wax, Irving Younger, may they dwell in the house of the Lord forever and ever. Holocaust survivor Inga Hurwitz, our president emeritus, has been a part of EmekSholom since its inception in 1955. For 20 continuous years, she was our past president. Today, she continues to serve on board as our historian, and will share the story of her cousin, Max Windmiller, of blessed memory.
My journey to discovering the story of Max Windmiller. In 1997, Jaap Pollock, a relative, sent me a poem written by Max Windmiller. The poem appeared at the beginning of a Dutch Holocaust memorial book, Nooit te vergeten, Never to Forget. And then my search to learn more about this fourth cousin began. This is the poem that was written while he was on a train, and this is an abbreviated translation. The wheels, they rhythmically rattle, the night is cold and dark, and tired my spirit and heart. Then out of the darkest of darkness, suddenly I see your face. Your soft voice whispers into my ear. Your hand strokes gently my cheek. Your smile moistens my eyes. Your lips kiss me passionately. I feel the kisses go on and on. But then, with a start, I see daylight. With a sigh, I awaken. Why can't I dream longer? Why can't I be with you? Through correspondence with relatives in Israel, I was connected to a professor in Germany, Emden, the city where Max was born. This professor's research had led him to Israel to interview those who had known Max throughout his life. Professor Klaus Meyer-Dettem generously shared with me what he had learned, first by phone, and then in an unpublished German document, which Anne-Marie Perel lovingly translated. Over the years, I also often spoke by phone with the love of Max's short life, Meta, who was living in Israel. I learned about Max's heroism, and I wanted his story to be written in English, mainly for young adults who would be inspired by it. So last year, a book was written by Daniel Sachs entitled To Save One Life, Max Windmüller and the Dutch Rescue and Resistance Movement. And this is Max's story. He was born 1920 in Emden, a port city on the Baltic Sea near the Dutch border. In 1933, shortly after Hitler came to power, his father's business license was revoked, and his parents and their 4 children fled across the border to Groningen, Holland. Having trouble changing pages. Thank you. Okay. Max finished his schooling in Holland, hoping to emigrate to what was then Palestine. He began training on a Dutch farm to acquire the necessary agricultural skills. During visits to his cousins on another agricultural training farm, Max met a beautiful 16-year-old girl named Meta Lundy, and they were attracted to one another. After the agricultural training, Max joined Joop Westerveel and his group of Jewish and non-Jewish rescuers and resistors. He assumed the alias Cornelius Andriga, CORE for short, and he became a valued member of the group. In July 1939, he could not resist the opportunity to get to Palestine with his brother Itzhak, aboard the illegal ship the Dora. As Max was about to board the ship in Amsterdam, a member of the Westerveel group came to plead with him to remain in Holland to coordinate the rescue of Jewish youths. He reluctantly heeded that plea, and he stayed behind, promising his brother to take the next ship. But the Dora was the last ship to leave Amsterdam for Palestine, and this was Max's first, what I call, his near survival. In May of 1940, the Nazis invaded Holland and began rounding up Jews. Max and the other Westerveel resistors worked tirelessly to move Jewish youngsters to safety outside of Holland. They forged documents, sought safe routes and safe houses. Then they escorted small groups at a time across 3 borders, ending in the treacherous climb over the Pyrenees Mountains to safety in Spain. One day, Max encountered Meta, fleeing with a group from Holland. They were immediately drawn to each other again. Meta stayed and joined the resistors, operating then out of Paris, and she and Max became lovers. When some members of the group were arrested and deported, Max, now in his early 20s, moved into a position of prominence. Altogether, 320 Jewish youths had been rescued when, on a fateful day in July 1944, Max and most of his remaining comrades were betrayed, arrested, and imprisoned in Drancy, outside of Paris. Tortured but refusing to talk, Max and the others were then put on the last train to leave Paris before the city was liberated. And that train headed east to concentration camp Buchenwald, Max's second near survival, the last train. He then endured 8 months of near starvation and abuse in several camps, and on April 18th, as Allied armies were advancing, Max and other prisoners were forced on a death march away from the Flossenburg concentration camp. Weakened and feverish from typhus, he bent down to drink from a puddle of water, and a German guard shot and killed him. One day before this column of prisoners was liberated by American forces, and near Qam, and I have reason to think that Esther Kuttner was on that death march. She survived, thank God. The citizens of Emden now honor Max's memory by means of educational activities for students who visit concentration camps. A street in Emden now bears his name, and the Historical Society was renamed the Max Windmüller Gesellschaft. In 2017, the high school became the Max Windmüller Gymnasium. A German language film was produced, available with English subtitles, Code Name Core, The Dramatic Life of Max Windmüller. In Israel, there is a Yup Westerville wood with a beautiful monument bearing the names of Max Windmüller and 8 other members of the group. It's visited each year by the now elderly people who were saved. Max Core Windmüller is remembered in Richmond at the Virginia Holocaust Museum, and right here, his name is engraved at the bottom of the far right panel of the EmekSholom Holocaust Memorial.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm 73 years old, and I'm the boy chick around here. What that means is we need to engage some of the younger people, and that's what this next part of the program is all about. Attorney Esther J. Windmüller, Inga's niece of blessed memory, began a Never Again Award. Richmond native, attorney Lenora Cookie Soledar, co-president of the board of EmekSholom Holocaust Memorial Cemetery, will present the winner of the Esther J. Windmüller Never Again Award. Both of Cookie's parents were immigrants from Vienna, Austria. Her mother arrived here in the 1920s. Her father dodged the cursed Nazis, arriving here just before Kristallnacht in November of 1938. Her father, Hans Hofer of blessed memory, was buried here in 1957, just 2 years after this site was dedicated. Greta Hofer of blessed memory, Cookie's mother, was a strong woman who had to take on the burden of raising 2 small children herself and lived to the blessed age of 104 and now rests beside her beloved father, her beloved husband. When one is good, 104 is not too soon, is much too soon, pardon me.
Thank you, Alex. I am privileged today to tell you about the Esther J. Windmüller Never Again Award and to introduce to you this year's recipient, Leah Coder. This award is named after Esther Jeanette Windmüller of blessed memory, who created the framework for this annual essay offered to students throughout the Commonwealth. The theme for the essay every year is Never Again. Never again shall our people be persecuted. Never again shall any other group be persecuted. What people are being persecuted today? And what can we do as human beings to make sure that these atrocities are wiped away from the face of our earth? Esther Windmüller was a beautiful human being both inside and out. She was a member of the board of directors of EmekSholom Holocaust Memorial Cemetery for many years and was the creator of this essay competition since its inception. Esther was a criminal defense attorney, a substitute judge, an adjunct law professor, and the organizer or one of the organizers of a cancer support and awareness group, Cancer Dancer. Throughout her life, Esther exuded optimism, kindness, and love. Esther lost her battle with ovarian cancer in 2017 at the age of 50. To honor Esther, the Board of Directors named this annual award in her memory. Now it's my pleasure to recognize this year's winner, Leah Coder. Leah is a 10th grade student at the Stewart School. Leah enjoys running and writing. She aspires to study music at a music conservatory and become an opera singer. I believe Leah's teacher, Stephanie Arnold, is here today, and she encouraged her students to contribute to contribute to this essay. The title of Leah's essay is Never Again, The Genocide of the Yazidis. I'd like you to welcome Leah Coder. Congratulations.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For my essay, I will be presenting the genocide of the Yazidis. Here we go again. 80-year-old Judah Samet, a Holocaust survivor, said, after narrowly escaping the massacre at Pittsburgh's Tree of Life Synagogue on October 27, 2018. The Holocaust survivor was only 4 minutes late to the service that killed 11 innocent people. Again, Mr. Samet managed to escape the line of fire and his death once more. Remembering the anti-Semitism he witnessed during the Holocaust, it never stops, he said. We all want to believe atrocities of the Holocaust would never happen again. However, it still continues to happen in different times, in different places, and with different people. What is a genocide? A genocide is a killing of a large group of people, mainly affiliated with a particular ethnic group or nation. However, this word did not exist until 1943. By pairing the Greek word genos, meaning race or family, with the Latin word sidre, the term was coined by Raphael Lemkin, a Polish doctor. There have been many genocides throughout history, such as the Armenian, Jewish, Cambodian, Rwandan, Bosnian, and Darfurian people. However, with all the hate and violence in this world, genocides like these still exist today. One of these genocides would be the Yazidi genocide. The Yazidis are an ethnic, religious minority who are from Iraq. They are considered to be one of Iraq's oldest minorities, and there are about 70,000 to 500,000 Yazidi people living there. The Yazidi religion was founded in the 11th century and was derived from Christianity and Islam. In 2014, these minorities have been targeted by ISIS. ISIS has been targeting them because they all want to convert Yazidis to Islam. Islamic militants have trapped 400,000 of Iraq's religious minorities. The total number of Yazidi people that have been killed so far by ISIS are about 5,000 people. This makes up 10% of their population. This is a significant amount considering they have such a small population. Women and children have been used as sex slaves. There are around 120,000 Yazidi people that have sought refuge in Europe since 2014. They were forced to flee to Mount Sinjar or else face slaughter by ISIS. However, this has not been the first genocide. The Yazidis have suffered 72 genocides in their existence. The Holocaust genocide was a very dark period throughout history. In order to prevent a genocide like the Holocaust from happening again, we must take action to prevent genocides such as the Yazidis. However, we must understand why genocides as tragic as these are happening. Houses of worship should continue to teach their congregation love and acceptance of others that are different. Intercultural and interfaith groups in schools should be formed, where people can educate others of their differences. We must also stop ignorance. Ignorance is the biggest weapon used to ignite racism. In order to fight the darkness in the world, we must bring light with kindness towards each other by embracing one another's differences. Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful delivery, Layla. Thank you so much for that. That contribution was terrific. The most important part about that is don't forget to collect your $300. I may need a loan later. Just one exception I have with what was said, and that is an oxymoron was mentioned, Islamic terrorist, and it's because the Prophet has only allowed Muslims to fight in self-defense, but self-defense is inclusive and repeatedly stated of self-defense of Muslims, Christians, and Jews. And so when we say never again, we mean inclusive never again. Never again for the senseless murder and genocides of all of God's children. Love for all, hatred for none. Sadly, since the slaughter of the Holocaust, we have witnessed 6 genocides, one of which was the killings in South Sudan. Today, I want you to recognize one of those 20,000 lost boys of Sudan who at age 7 survived the murder of his family, his people, and himself being sold into slavery. Many know that Virginia is the birthplace of presidents. 8 U.S. heads of state were born here. Keep that in mind. And that's not counting Joseph Jenkins Roberts, then the Petersburg barber who became the first elected president of Liberia in 1947. Our Commonwealth may claim even one more head of state. My friend of these past 10 years, Bolge Deng, came to America 20 years ago as a refugee and now works on the loading docks at Lowe's. He does this at night so that he can work in the daytime as he runs to free his people as part of the president. To become president, he's running for the presidency of our planet's newest country, South Sudan, the home he was torn from as a child. Mr. Deng is running for president of his country on the Kush Democratic Majority Party. Mr. Bolgang, would you stand up? Turn around and wave. Show everybody what a trained American leader looks like. David Ball is here too. His father was a heroic Tuskegee fighter pilot during the Second World War. I call him out only because yesterday was an unveiling of his father's statue at the Black History and Cultural Museum here in Richmond. And he was also a colleague and a personal friend of Evelyn Windmuller, not Evelyn. Esther, pardon me, I'm talking about her mother now. David, would you stand up and be recognized, please? Howard Ball died in 2008. 138 missions he flew. Our other co-president, Ben Kuttner, will introduce our speaker today. Ben's father, Leo Kuttner of blessed memory, a tailor and upholsterer and German citizen, was born in the free city of Danzig, which we Polish people call Gdansk. Leo was rounded up on September 1st, 1939, the same day the Germans came running through Poland. He survived internment in 5 different camps, death camps, work camps, and a death march relying on luck, a Yiddish cup, chutzpah, if you don't speak Yiddish in Mexico, I believe it's called cojones. If you're language challenged, you may see me later. After liberation, Leo arrived at a displaced camp in Hamm, Germany, the same one that Inga was speaking about earlier. It's about 85 miles east of Nuremberg. From her home in Poland, Ben's mother, Esther, of blessed memory, and her family were herded 20 miles into the Lodz ghetto, the awful Lodz ghetto, the horrible Lodz ghetto, and eventually to Auschwitz. Upon arriving in Auschwitz, an arbitrary twist of the thumb by Joseph Mengele sent her family to death, and she was allowed to survive. She also survived a death march, shivering, starving, eating grass that was ground between the snow and mud from beneath her marching feet, and luckily the guards didn't see her, as they did Inga's cousin, or she would have been shot also. She too found herself in Hamm after liberation, where she and Leo were married. It was in this DP camp that Ben was born 1 year later. Ben would go on to graduate from the University of Richmond and eventually applied his computer and mathematics skill that he learned at the university with a great Yiddish cup, a great deal of empathy, to become a highly successful businessman in our community, serving as CEO of Vatex Corp, and today is the president of VTI Holdings from 2013 till today. Please welcome Ben Kuttner to the lectern as he introduces our keynote speaker.
Good afternoon and welcome. On a side note, because COM was mentioned a couple of times today, I was actually there just a few years ago and was hoping to see the remnants of what might have happened in this city where my parents and many others were saved and brought back to life, and sadly could find nothing. Visited the visitor center, lots of pamphlets talking about the great history of COM going back to the 1300s and 1400s, and nothing about the role they played in saving Jews after the end of the war. But that is where we are today. So good afternoon and welcome. I'm Ben Kuttner, as Alex said. I'm co-president of the EmekSholom Holocaust Memorial Cemetery. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to introduce our guest speaker, Alexandra Zapruder. Alexandra began her career as a member of the founding staff of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. A graduate of Smith College, she earned her master's degree in education at Harvard in 1995. In 1992, Alexandra began to collect diaries written by children during the Holocaust. The diaries presented in her book, Salvaged Pages, show the wide range of young writers' responses to the horrors they faced. These diaries speak eloquently of both hope and despair. In 2002, she completed her first book, Salvaged Pages, Young Writers' Diaries of the Holocaust, which was published by Yale University Press and won the National Book Award in the National Jewish Book Award in the Holocaust category. She wrote and co-produced I'm Still Here, a documentary film for young audiences based on her book, which aired on MTV in 2005 and was nominated for 2 Emmy Awards. In the fall of 2015, she completed a second paperback edition and a multimedia edition of Salvaged Pages, and worked with the educational nonprofit Facing History and Ourselves to develop interdisciplinary educational materials for the book designed for middle and high school teachers. In November 2016, she published her second book, 26 Seconds, a personal history of the Zapruder film, which tells the story of her grandfather's movie of President Kennedy's assassination. Alexandra consults on educational projects related to the Holocaust, continues to write, travels extensively to speak to students, teachers, and the public about her books. She's the mother of 2 children and lives in Washington, D.C., or in the Washington, D.C. area. I am most honored, and I would be very grateful if you would help me to welcome Alexandra Zapruder.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Can you all hear me? It got colder. What happened? I was feeling so promising before. I hope everyone is warm enough, and I will try not to go on for too long. I want to thank you so much for having me. What an extraordinary place this is, this historic cemetery, this amazingly vibrant and clearly warm and welcoming community, and I'm just so pleased to be here. I want to thank Tommy Bear for inviting me. I've had a chance to get to know Tommy and his beautiful wife, Betty, over these last few days, and it's been a pleasure. And also to Captain Alex Keisch for also making me very, very welcome. So I thought what I would do is speak a little bit about the diaries of teenagers who wrote during the Holocaust. This is the first love of my life in a literary sense, and the work that I have spent most of my time doing, and it's the work that I continue to return to no matter how much I try to write something else or do something else. It always comes back to these writings. And so I'm going to read from 3 diary entries today by 3 different teenagers. And I'll just say that I've spent, of course, an enormous amount of time over the last 25 years thinking about not only the extraordinary range of the material that I collected and that continues to surface. These include diaries by teenagers, young people anywhere from the ages of 12 to 20 or 21, boys and girls, of course, from all over the continent of Europe in all different kinds of circumstances, refugees, young people in hiding like Anne Frank or passing as non-Jews, and of course young people in ghettos. Nothing from the concentration camps, I think it is worth noting. They are from families all along the political spectrum, all along the religious spectrum, some by young people who were in families that were from deeply Orthodox, very traditional families, others who were secularly inclined, who were deeply connected to their Jewish background, but not particularly religious, and then some who were completely disconnected from their Jewish backgrounds and completely assimilated, and even a number of some young people who were from half Jewish, half not Jewish parents, and one young boy who was converted to Catholicism and brought up as a Catholic, but persecuted as a Jew. So I always try to think about, across this great range of languages and backgrounds and histories, and of course the sort of most important signifier of individuality of all, which is the voice of the individual person. What can draw them together? How can we think about this body of material as a whole? And in this context, I think there are 3 things that come to mind in thinking about what they mean and why it is worth reading them. First, diaries are a unique witness to the historical past. They are written in real time as events occur without a knowledge of the outcome. And because of that, they tend to capture tremendous detail, the texture of daily life, little details that would be forgotten perhaps by the survivor or never known even by the historian. And so it is these little details that we listen for when we hear these diaries. What was the texture of daily life? What was its complexity? We all know that we live in the complexity of our own time, our own experience. And it is so easy to forget that people in the past also lived that way. It was just as complicated for them as it is for us. The other piece is to safeguard these individual voices. Anne Frank's diary for so long was the voice to speak for all of the children. But as you hear these different writers, I hope you'll hear just how unique each one is. And it's something that we talk about a lot and try to emphasize in Holocaust education, that it is through understanding the individual loss of an individual life and all the uniqueness of a person that we might begin to apprehend what this really means. And finally, to complicate our understanding of the historical past, not to simplify it, to dwell in these writings in a way that allows us to understand the moral dimension of this historical moment and how difficult it was for people to navigate it and how they did it and at what cost. So I'm going to begin by reading from the diary of a boy named Klaus Langer. This is one of the only diaries that describes the event of Kristallnacht. So Klaus Langer was 14 at the time that he was writing his diary in Essen, Germany. He was from a very assimilated family. His father had been a judge and had been dismissed, of course, by the time this entry was written in 1938. His parents were highly acculturated. They had non-Jewish and Jewish friends. They played musicians. His father was a veteran of the First World War, and they were very much the kind of German Jews who were in this experience, living this gradual escalation and struggling to understand what it meant and what they should do in response to it. And of course, as for all who lived this moment, Kristallnacht was a tremendous shock and a turning point. So this is his diary entry from November 11th, 1938. The past 3 days brought significant changes in our lives. On November 7th, a German legation member was assassinated in Paris. He died 2 days later. The day following came the consequences. At 3 o'clock, the synagogue and the Jewish Youth Center were put on fire. Then they began to destroy Jewish businesses. During the morning, private homes were also being demolished. Fires were started at single homes belonging to Jews. At 6:30 in the morning, the Gestapo came to our house and arrested father and mother. Mother returned after about 1.5 hours. Dad remained and was put in prison. In the morning, I went to Bobby's house. Bobby was at the synagogue and at the youth center in the morning and saw how they burned. We returned to our neighborhood by 2 o'clock. Not far from us, we saw a gang vandalizing a home, throwing things out the window. When I went around the corner and looked up at my street, there was nothing to see. But when I turned into the front yard, I saw that the house was damaged. I walked on glass splinters. In the hallway, I met Frau Baum, who lived upstairs. I ran into our apartment and found unbelievable destruction in every room. My parents' instruments were destroyed, the dishes were broken, the windows were broken, furniture upturned, the desk was turned over, drawers and mirrors broken, and the radio smashed. In the evening, Mother brought gold and other valuables for safekeeping to Christian acquaintances. Then, in the middle of the night, at 2:30 a.m., the stormtroopers smashed windows and threw stones against store shutters. After a few minutes, they demanded to be let into the house. Allegedly, they were looking for weapons. After they found no weapons, they left. But after that, no one was able to go back to sleep. The time passed terribly slowly. I shall never forget that night. Books could be written about all that happened and about which we now begin to learn more. But I have to be careful. A new regulation was issued that the Jews in Germany had to pay 1 billion Reichmarks for restitution. What for? For the damage the Nazis had done to the Jews in Germany. Klaus was able, the rest of Klaus's diary is devoted to the incredibly tense and difficult story of his attempt to emigrate from Nazi Germany, which he was finally able to do through the Youth Aliyah movement, and left the very day after the war began, leaving his parents and grandmother behind. He went from Germany eventually to Palestine, where he settled. And his mother died of illness in 1941, I believe. And his father and grandmother were eventually rounded up, deported to Theresienstadt, and from there to a killing site where they were murdered. He lived the rest of his life on a kibbutz in Israel. So I want to read now from a very different diary. This is the diary of Yitzhak Rudashevsky. It is one of my favorites, if you can say that. Rudashevsky was also 14-year-old boy writing in Vilna, Lithuania. And many of you may know that Vilna was a tremendous center of Jewish life and learning until the time of World War II. Rudashevsky was a writer. That's part of why I love him so much. He was a writer's writer, someone who loved language and loved self-expression and who believed in the power of the written word to communicate across time. And he took on, in the Vilna ghetto, the writing of a diary that was not only his own story, but even more than that, a chronicle of what was happening to his community. And this is an entry that he wrote on October of 1942, describing the ruins on the street in Vilna ghetto and what they evoke for him of the state of his Jewish community. So I'll read this entry and then say a few words about it after. This is Friday, the 2nd of October, 1942. Since new districts that border on our Disner Alley have been added to our ghetto, and since our little street is full of ruins that run through the whole of Yatkaver Street, these ruins are being torn down. Now demolished walls stand. In the daytime, you can see blue sky, and at night, the stars through the black holes that serve as windows. Strange feelings come over me as I look at the black ruins shattered by the bloody storm that used to sweep over our ghetto. I look at the black holes, at the fragments of stoves. How much tragedy and anguish is mirrored in every shattered brick, in every dark crack, in every bit of plaster with a piece of wallpaper. Here the murderers, the Lithuanians, broke in like animals with axes and with crowbars and sought their prey. Through here, hungry people used to crawl outside the ghetto and bring in some food. Here in the ruins, the people broke and pierced the walls, tearing boards to cook their meager midday meal. Here, Germans stood and laughed at the horror, and Jews walked around near the ruins and bit their lips until they bled in misery and shame. Here on the black walls is inscribed in blood and tears all our tragedy and pain. As I look at the ruins, an uncanny feeling comes over me to see how Jews putter around there. I too crawl between the bricks, pieces of wallpaper, tiles, and it seems to me a lamentation ascends from the black crevices, from the stale holes. It seems to me that the ruins are weeping and importuning, as though lives were hidden here. There's so many things happening in this entry, but there are a few things worth attending to. One is the idea of the ruins as a metaphor for the Jewish community. Ruins that are a fragment of what they were, but nevertheless remain beautiful in their way, through which one can see the sky and the stars. That there is something even about this diminished community that is to be loved and to be treasured. Another thing, I'm sure many of you noticed the mention of the Lithuanians, that what Rudiszewski does in this short entry is to lay out for us in just a few lines the critical reminder that it is not only perpetrators, Germans in this instance, and Jews, but that this tragedy took place because people cooperated and people allowed it to happen. And this is what I mean about the tremendous power of a diary like this one. It's a little, almost like he didn't even notice it, just a little mention that you could so easily pass by, but there it is on the page. That was his reality, that he could not forget that these people who were his neighbors, who were people that he knew, had turned on them and participated in this terrible slaughter. And finally, these words, here, is where it happened. Here in these ruins are our witnesses, and they hold that memory. And I was thinking as I was sitting here listening to all the other speakers that there are very few places in America that have that sacred quality, because this war didn't happen here. But this is one of those places with these survivors buried here. And it is tremendously meaningful and moving to be here for this occasion. So finally, I want to read from the diary of Elza Binder. Oh, I should have said, I'm sorry to say that Yitzhak Rudiszewski went into hiding at the time of the liquidation of the Vilna ghetto and was caught with his family, taken and murdered in September of 1943. And his diary was found by his cousin, and that is how it survived. Finally, I want to read from the diary of Elza Binder, and I thought I had saved the page, but of course I didn't. Okay. So Elza was a little older. She was 12 years old. Almost 21 years old at the time that she was writing in Stanislavov ghetto in Poland. And she was a very sharp-witted, somewhat possibly cynical, clever young woman, who had an unusual way with language and a keen eye for the injustices that she saw around her. Not only, not only those at the hands of the Germans, but the kind of corruption that she witnessed inside the ghetto itself and other dimensions of human behavior. But this is an entry that she wrote about the passage of time and hope, which is something that is a very common theme. But in this context, it is something fresh and different. And I will again read it and then say a few words about it in closing. Friday, January 30th, 1942. When fear crawls out in the evenings from all four corners, when the winter storm raging outside tells you it is winter and that it is difficult to live in the winter. When my soul trembles at the sight of distant fantasies, I shiver and say one word with every heartbeat, every pulse, every piece of my soul. Liberation. In such moments, it hardly matters where it is going to come from and who will bring it, so long as it's faster and comes sooner. Doubts are growing in my soul. Quiet. Blessed be he who brings good news, no matter from where, no matter to where. Time, go ahead. Time which carries liberation in its unknown tomorrow. Maybe not for me, but for people like me. The result is certain. Down with any doubts. Everything comes to an end. Spring will come. What I think is so extraordinary about this entry is that there are many, many, many writers who write about hope. And usually when they write about hope, they mean for themselves, their own survival. Would they live to see the liberation? Would their families make it to the end? But Elsa's talking about something else here. She says, maybe not for me, but for people like me. She is asserting her faith in a world that will eventually right itself. That there is such a thing as good and evil, there is such a thing as right and wrong, and that good ultimately will prevail, and that is what matters, even if she is not there to see it. And I think that this is a message, at least for me, that is never been more powerful than it is at this very difficult time that we are living through in our country. So I want to thank you so much for listening to these writers and for remembering them and for inviting me to be with you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, as a Zapruder. I'm very fond of that name, Alexandra. It should be noted that persecution of Jews were widespread shortly after Hitler took over January 30th, 1933, and it was not Kristallnacht that began this persecution. Many people feel that the election of Hitler was the beginning of the Holocaust. But the significance of Kristallnacht was that they were able to gin up the base and create a critical mass of German people, German-speaking people, who then went on this wilding, this awful rampage. And from here on, it was okay to do what you will against Jews, although hundreds of pieces of legislation had already been written to limit the ability of Jews to live. We have 11 candlelighters. Would you please come forward? If I'd called your name earlier, come forward right here, stand with us. Each of the past 63 years, our ushers lit 6 candles on a memorial wall, each candle representing 1 million of our loved ones who were murdered. This year, we light 11. If you don't see 11 people here, please come forward. Anybody from the board? We have 2 more coming. This year, we light 11, remembering our 11 brothers and sisters who were slain in their temple during the worship service 2 weeks and 1 day ago today. Keep in mind that the number 11 sits, within the number 11 sits the number 6. So we still remember our 6 million with the lighting of the candles, as well as the 11 murdered.
Sarah K. Mizels, Baruch Mamelas, Dana Hidron, Mincia Stolja, Sheftel Stolja, Chaim S. Kaskevich, Israel Moskowitz, Siegfried Reinhardt, Chaim Friedman, Yossel Pasternak.
The names you hear are being recited by Holocaust survivors. The names that you see on the wall, 462 total. Little by little, we go through them all through our service each year. Because as Inga did, Inga Hurwitz fleshed out a single name, who was a person, who was a human. It wasn't just writing on a cold wall. He breathed, he loved, he lived, and he died. A few years ago, Inga asked me if I wanted my family up there, and I said, of course, put my mother and my father. She said, I can't. I said, why can't you? She said, they survived the war. I was very depressed. Although I had a large family, they were all murdered before I was born in one of those terrible camps. And about 2 weeks after that, I had an epiphany. I realized that my twin and I were named for our grandfathers. So both of our grandfathers are on the wall. Ladies and gentlemen, Cantor Sarah Beck Berman is the Cantor congregation Beth Ahaba, which was founded in 1789 and is one of the oldest synagogues in America. It was founded by Spanish and Portuguese Jews. The emotional potential of music is the core of what drew Beck Berman to the music of worship. Her father is Dennis Beck Berman of Congregation Brith Achim in Petersburg, Virginia. Cantor Beck Berman has always enjoyed leading services from the Torah while growing up. She will sing the hauntingly beautiful Al Mole Rachamim, a prayer which translates, God full of compassion. El Mole Rachamim is a remembrance prayer for the souls of the departed. It is being sung today in remembrance of our 6 million departed in Europe and the 11 recent Jewish martyrs from Pittsburgh. Please all stand for this prayer, El Mole Rachamim.
God, filled with compassion, justice of widows and parent of orphans, please do not be silent or hold your peace for the blood of Israel that was shed like water. Grant infinite rest on the wings of your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, shining and radiating light like the first light of creation, to the souls of the millions of Jews, adults and children, who were murdered, slaughtered, burned, strangled, and buried alive. All of them holy and pure in your eyes, may they rest in paradise. Therefore, Master of compassion, shelter them in the comfort of your wings forever. May their souls be woven into the tapestry of life eternal, with you as their comfort. May they rest in peace. Il male rachamim, Dayan almanot v'avi tomim, Al תחשב ותתאפק לדם ישראל שנשפך כמים. המצא מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מאירים ומזהירים, לנשמותיהם של רבבות אלפי ישראל, אנשים ונשים, ילדים וילדות, שנהרגו ונשחטו ונשרפו ונחנקו ונקברו חיים, כולם קדושים וטהורים, בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירים בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום, בשלום, בשלום על משכבם. ונאמר, and let us say, Amen.
Whew, give me a moment. My father lost all of his 13 brothers and sisters. Those of you who can, please remain standing. All of his nieces, all of his nephews, his grandparents, a multitude of cousins in the bloodbath of our people during the Holocaust. And his occasional bouts and moments of darkness, solitude, despair, depression, melancholy, I could hear him mutter when he thought no one was looking or listening, "Why not 6,000,001?" meaning himself. In the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette on Friday, November 2nd, 6 days after the shooting, the front page banner headline was in Hebrew and read, "Yitgadal v'yikadash Shemei Rabbah." The first line of the Mourner's Kaddish. And if you watched the NBC Evening News that evening, you heard them end the program with the entire Kaddish prayer. It was done in Hebrew, and after which you heard anchorman Lester Holt signing off with, "And may their memories be a blessing," a very Hebrew benediction. Today we say Kaddish not for 6,000,000 just, as in my father's, and one, as in my father's bouts of melancholy, but for the 6,000,011. Why do we say Mourner's Kaddish? We say Kaddish to show that despite our loss, we still praise God. Please remain standing as Cantor Bernbeck does the Kaddish for us.
Please feel free to join me if you know the words. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, Amen. Be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal Shemei d'Kudisha b'richu. Le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata. Tush bechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran be'alma v'imru, Amen. Yehei Shalama Rabba min Shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. V'imru, Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. V'al kol Yisrael. V'al kol yoshvei tevel. V'imru, Amen.
You all may be seated. Rabbi Dennis Beck Berman, you done good, lad. On Tuesday evening, October 30th, 3 days after the Pittsburgh slaughter, a memorial service was organized by the Jewish Community Federation of Richmond and the Weinstein JCC, where Rabbi Ahuva Zakhes of Congregation Orami addressed a crowd of 1,500 kindred souls from all faiths. Quoting a famous 12th century rabbi, she said, "Evil is not an entity of itself. Rather, evil is an absence of good, just as darkness is an absence of light." Rabbi Yosel Krantz of Chabad held a service the day after this slaughter at a synagogue. His message was that healing comes from Tikkun Olam, a dictum that commands Jews to perform acts of charity and kindness. His closing command to us was to commit these acts of kindness, for these are the acts that will heal us and repair the world. At the conclusion of each service, every year, I've asked you to place a stone on the memorial if you so desire. That stone, grab one of those buckets. That stone shows that all who pass, someone who cares for the departed 6,000,011, have been here to visit the memorial. They remember. That's important. This year, I ask one more thing of you. This year, I want you to mentally mark your stone as you place it, and let the memory of that stone be a reminder to you that to do your mitzvah, do your tikkun olam before the week is over, and to take heart the lessons of these wise and holy men from several different faiths. Bishop Desmond Tutu has said, "Do your little bit of goods wherever you are. It is these little bits of good that change the world." His Holiness Mirza Mazhar Ahmed, blessings be upon him, says love for all, hatred for none. Rabbi Hillel of old when asked to describe his religion, he said, treat others as you would have them treat you. The rest is merely dialogue. The Dalai Lama. If you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. We all come forward if you wish. Please grab a stone. This is the end of our ceremony. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so very, very much for caring.
Adi, Singer, Erna, and Singer, Bernhard, Singer, Lisa, Regenbogen, Dinka, S. Regenbogen, Betty, Regenbogen, Joseph, Regenbogen, Henrik, Regenbogen, Melissa Regenbogen, Sally S. Berghofen, Jacob Berghofen,
Anna S. Nico, Ferdinand Nico. Shapiro, Joseph Shapiro, Abraham Shapiro, Mika Shapiro.
Thank you so much for having
Shapiro,
me. I am so
Shaya Shapiro.
because you look awfully young.
So they would do it.
Okay, how are you, man? I'm doing so well.
This is like the greatest spot here. This is like the greatest spot here.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Take care of her. She's worthwhile.
There was no other way to look. Right, no kind of stone.